Hello, everybody, and welcome to this Headless CMS panel. Thank you very, very much for making some time to, have a nice conversation about something we're all passionate about, which is giving fellow developers a great experience integrating their data and making their applications more powerful. We're going to start with some introductions. Gift, would you please introduce our panelists?
Yeah, sure. With me today, we have an amazing lineup of people talking about Headless CMS. We have Pierre, who is the CEO and co-founder of Strappy. We also have Dominic, who is the CEO and co-founder of Storyblock. And finally, we have Knut, the head of developer relations at Sanity. It's very nice to have you all.
Definitely. Thank you all for being here. What an amazing lineup and really like very strong players in the headless CMS industry. I personally have experience with all of your products, so I am really grateful for you that you're here with us today. We would like to start with one question to kind of break the ice a bit and get the conversation started. And let's start maybe with Pierre, and then we pass the potato around. Could you please describe in one sentence what Strappy is and what is something that you are really strong in?
Okay, so Strappy is an open source headless CMS. I think this is the main difference. So all the code is public. So that means that you can change the code base. You can even fork it if you want to. But it's really mean that you can host Strappy on your own servers. So that's one of the main differentiators. And it's highly customizable as well. It's based on a plugin system, and there is a very active community. So just to keep the story short.
Very, very concise. What about you, Dominic? Can you tell us in one sentence about Storyblock?
Yeah, absolutely. So Storyblock is also headless CMS. We're not open source, but we scale for you. So we are basically a hosted solution for you. We do have our strength actually in the visual editing of your content. So not only are we headless, we also combine it with a visual editor for your marketing people that are not technical. So they can easily manage websites, apps, and any kind of content in a structured, nested way. And together with that, we are highly extensible using vue.js. We have a complete plugin system on top of that. You can extend Storyblock even though we are a SaaS solution with custom applications. Extend it with all your needs, basically.
Thank you, Dominic. What about Sanity, Knut? What can you tell us about Sanity in one sentence?
Yeah, so Sanity, we call it a content platform, and I guess you can use it as a headless CMS, but we build technologies that let you treat content as data. So we have a real-time data store that's hosted, and much of like everything else is pretty much open source. There's an open source studio that's your CMS that you can customize and have plugins for, and all of that good stuff.
I'm particularly interested in this part about it being a platform, and maybe if we can start, having a conversation about that, Sanity and the way that the headless CMS space has been moving is really content heavy or data heavy. With all the integrations, if you heard the answers, one very common point was the extensibility and the plugin systems. So when you talk about it being a platform as only a tool, what are some of the things around the particular offering that make it a platform? And we can start.
Yeah, should I start? Sure. That's a fair question. So the reason is that we try to get out of the way to let people build the content infrastructure that they need to build and the integrations that they actually need to have. So we try to leave assumptions about that out of the thing and make some useful abstractions. So this is a very roundabout way to say that instead of like making assumptions on how you want to store rich text, we made a agnostic rich text specification that lets you put that out as HTML or Alexa, voice assistant, markup language, or just React components or Vue or whatever. So we really try to make something that people can build their stuff on top of. That would be my answer.
And from the thank you for that. And on the side of the open source nature that Strapi offers, for example, Pierre, this is probably also something that's similar in the sense that you can integrate with many different sources of data. And how is that perception of, is Strapi also kind of be described as a platform?
I wouldn't say a platform, since it's not as precise as it could describe Strapi. But one important thing about Strapi, that's at the beginning we started Strapi not as a headless CMS, but as a Node.js framework to build APIs. And even the name comes from bootstrap your API. That's a secret, keep it for you.
Trivia, thank you.
And at the beginning, the purpose of Strapi was really to help developers building APIs to manage data and not content. So that's why you have all of this customization capabilities at the moment. But we realized that half of our users were building APIs and the other half were using Strapi as a CMS. So it was quite confusing both for the users and for us, because the roadmap was one day for the API, one day for the content, etc., etc. So we decided to focus at Headless CMS. So this is how we define Strapi now. But thanks to our previous vision, we have all of these customization capabilities. Developers can go directly in the code and they can override or create any new API endpoint. So that's definitely one of the main differences. And Strapi also has been open source from the beginning because we've been using other traditional CMSs. I won't give any name, but you definitely know what it can be. And so it was a no-brainer for us. And because as developers, we really wanted to have access to the code base, to the different customization capabilities to change any logic, both in the API and in the dashboard. So that's why we have all of these benefits from the past. And that this is what made the Strapi the most different. And just to give you a few other examples, for example, Strapi is database agnostic. So you can use it with SQLite, MySQL, PostgreSQL, and MongoDB. And you can deploy it on any platform. So all the things really give to companies a lot of flexibility, especially if they are used to deploy on AWS, for example, they will be able to connect their CMS to AWS free, or if it's cloud platform, Google Cloud Platform, they will do the same. So this is really why and what makes Strapi different.
And the trifecta in general, when talking about the headless integration or an API, is how is the data stored? You mentioned that. Knut also mentioned the data store being a very important part of Sanity. The endpoints, right? The communication. And then there's the visual aspect of it and the integration and the collaboration you can get with the users of that headless CMS. And I think from what I heard in your description, Dominic, Storyblok is really trying to also focus on that side. How is this something that, where does the idea of being more known for the visual part of headless comes from? And then, what are your ideas on this?
Yeah, so for that, you need to know that Alexander and I, we started out an agency about 5 years ago, looking for new CMS. We used a really old enterprise content management system, which name I'm also not going to name. We can generally have really, really bad feedback from customers that were using it from a marketing perspective. And I guess all of you have the same experience that most of the solutions out there, and talking about monolithic systems, are feeling like a database, also for the content marketers itself. Even though Headless CMS acts as a database in some kind, the experience is already way better with all of them. We tried to, since our background was quite visual all the time, like we built websites for large corporates, we built e-commerce solutions, we built storytelling elements into applications from iOS, Android, and so on. And we always had this visual kind of topic in our head whenever we wanted to do something and when we wanted to give it to our customers so they can manage content themselves, because we didn't want to end up managing content again from a developer perspective. And so we created the idea of components that are completely decoupled from the actually site or the application itself. And you would then be able to actually use it in a nested kind of structure to build out your content. And we then decided to go for this visual kind of approach, which allows us to have a storyblock bridge, that's how we call it, to make a connection between your website and the JSON that we actually deliver. So even though we're completely headless, we have this small bridge element that is not necessary, to be honest. You can completely ignore it as well if you want. And you have this visual kind of experience. We just did a quick update on that yesterday. And yeah, that was our idea. We wanted to have something visual for the content creator and to give them an element of storytelling with components, with blocks. And that's actually where our name comes from, storytelling with blocks. Yeah, that's our origin.
We're getting all sorts of trivia questions from here for our next pub quiz about the headless space. One thing that I find really interesting from your answers as well is talking about how essentially the data transport between your different platforms and the consuming frontends is always, of course, JSON and a representation of this data in different formats. I would like to explore, maybe before jumping to one topic we would like to touch, is each one of these the solutions that your platforms have come up with have one particular way or another to display, for example, rich text, or display additional integration with your own components from your application. Is there maybe an effort on the industry larger on coming up with a standard way of interchanging, essentially representing rich text that is, because we already have HTML for that, right? Like many people would say. And that's definitely not the case, at least in your platform. So I would like to explore, maybe if I can go back to Knut, portable text is definitely one of the strong sides of Sanity when you read the documentation. Is this something that you see more players in the space maybe being open to adopt? Because that would be a nice feature to have in common, for example.
Yeah, so just to take a step back a bit, so portable text is this JSON-based rich text specification. It's open sourced and you can use it if you want. It comes with Sanity, of course. And the reason we made it is like we as well came from an agency that had to make kind of like a way to go about content because the other offerings wasn't doing the job, to be honest. And what we wanted to avoid is to have HTML in the database, because HTML is a fantastic thing when it's a browser that reads it. Pretty much everywhere else, it's kind of like a hassle to kind of like try to parse it and stuff. You have the famous Stack Overflow answer about parsing HTML with regex.
Yeah, so fun.
Yeah, and content editors, they shouldn't really use their time to figure out syntax and break stuff and so on. That easily happens. I do it. I break HTML all the time, right? So that's the reason. We also needed something that's easier to work with when we have a collaborative real-time environment, because when multiple people are writing in rich text at the same time, you need to kind of like solve that problem. So that's where portable text is from. Whether the industry will adopt it, that's an interesting question, because it still seems that we like as developers, we favor like stuff like Markdown and MDX and stuff that kind of like lies close to our hearts, because we prefer to write that way, many of us. But it's not really the best formats for storing mission critical content and kind of making that accessible for editors. So I hope that the industry is looking at stuff like portable text. Some of the other CMSs are making their own. But yeah, we gave it away. So feel free to take it. That would be awesome.
Which is the case for Storyblock, Dominic. You also have in Storyblock a JSON representation of rich text. Have you? Yeah, is this something that you see out there in the industry larger, that maybe other players in the space are hopefully coalescing into one standardized version of representing rich text this way?
Yeah, absolutely. So same as Knut, would be more than happy to have a standardized version of that. But I guess if we Headless CMSs play together with that, it's already started. But there's so many other vendors out there that are still monolithic that would produce random stuff. that this was just the starting point, I would say. Yes, we do have a rich text field ourselves, which comes with a JSON representation. We're actually using Prosemir in the background because they already have a JSON representation as well, which actually worked great for our needs at that point. And we actually have a custom field kind of module or option where you can extend Storyblocks view with a custom vue.js component, for example. So it wouldn't be that hard to add some portable text for sure. Maybe we'll do that in the future. I'm quite sure somebody in the community already tried it or actually is using it already. Nothing in the way with that, definitely not.
And well, speaking of community and extensibility, I think Strappy may have a good answer to this kind of challenge, right, Pierre? What is the approach that Strappy offers for representing rich text, and is there any efforts to maybe standardizing that as well with the industry?
Yeah, so first, disclaimer, I think it's really hard to make something standard in that field. So by default in Strappy, we provide a Markdown editor that we've built ourselves. So it's a custom Markdown editor, which is simple, easy. But we also see many companies that want to use CK editor or any other editor. And there are so many use cases in this market that we can't restrict to one specific editor. So there is a way to replace the current editor and to use another one. And I think it's extremely important because, again, there are tons of use cases. I do think storing HTML is not a good idea, so it's not secured. And it's actually an anti-pattern because if companies are using Headless CMS, it means that they want to display the content in many platforms. Maybe not now, but maybe they're building a website, but in 2 years, they will have to manage content on a mobile application. How can they do that with HTML? So HTML should never be stored. And it's not only for security reasons, but it's definitely an anti-pattern. So I think it will be really, really difficult to see one rich text editor or one kind of language for the rich text editor for every CMS. Every CMS has specificities, especially if in the editor you can link your content to. I mean, if you're building if you're writing an article and you want to link this article to a specific page, then you need to be able to create a link inside your rich text editor to be able to link to another page. And I think this is going to be really, really difficult to build something that can work on every CMS, because every CMS will have its own specifications. And another thing, which is sometimes in the middle between a rich text editor and the very well content structure edition, is so for example in Strappy we introduced the dynamic zones. And with something like the dynamic zones, you can create components that are reusable components. So you're going to build the page on the fly. And that means that maybe you're going to add a paragraph and then a title and then a slider, which you will never have a slider inside your rich text editor, because in a rich text editor, most of the time you have bold, italic, a few headings and so on, but you will never have a slider or maybe a form or something like this. So that's also something we see in the space, is the ability to create pages on the fly without a rich text editor. Sometimes it's better to have a rich text editor. Sometimes it's better to have something like dynamic zones. There's no perfect answer, but we definitely see a need for both things. And that's why in every Headless CMS, I think the content structure is extremely important. We see a lot of atomic content emerging in this space, like starting with field and then components and then dynamic zones and then content types. And that's a way to make something that is highly scalable and that can be made for several use cases. And components are especially important because you will eventually reuse components in different content types.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually quite cool because I remember, like, Knut, you shared a video of Sanity is able to link to other sources. Same is true for Blocks JSON representation. So there are ways to do that, definitely. And it's really cool that we are now in a stage where the technology that we're using with React or Vue or other solutions, we're actually able to leverage that to do that with a nice user experience as well. And coming back to your dynamic fields, Storyblock is built around that component idea from the beginning, and I'm completely with you. Like, you need all those smaller pieces. You need to start with fields. You need to have that rich text editor. You need the possibility of nest content elements or components, and then go further to a complete content type to give as much freedom to first the developer as well as the marketer. Because if you're not having that kind of flexibility in the structure itself, you will lose one of them on the way, either while they manage content or while developer actually creates the site, the app, the integration, whatever they want to build.
Yeah.
Also, sorry.
Go on.
Yeah, no, I also we also end up talking a lot about content distribution when we talk about these things, like where does it end up, and
Rendered.
right, where is it rendered? But another aspect of, like, for example, rich text or like these content structures that we are making is also the how you're able to actually also interact and query that content. So that's also where for example, JSON representation of rich text is handy, because now you can, like, if you want to, I don't know if it makes sense, but you could ask your Sanity data store to give you the 2 articles where there has been a flash that went off when you took the photo inside of the rich text, and there's 2 code examples. That doesn't make sense, but you can kind of like ask the data store that question and get the content back, and it leaves for a lot of like opportunities and possibilities. And also on the flip side, if you want to pragmatically enrich or augment or whatever that content, you need something to be able to do that. And that's not kind of like HTML that we have to parse on the server side, right? So there's other aspects that kind of like is unlocked when you go that route. Yeah.
And you said something really interesting at the beginning. Where is this going to end when you store this representation? I remember one of the things that was really interesting when reading about Sanity the first time was this idea behind being able to put a book together from a headless CMS. And that really shows the possibilities of the space in general. The content that we create, in this case for the web, and we store in our headless CMSs is really taking shape in many different forms. And I think the strengths that you all mentioned right now from your particular platforms really show how, well, developers have flexibility to really go nuts, right? And put their content in many ways and create it and distribute it in many other places.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing your perspective on that. Let's switch gears a bit. Headless CMSs now allow front-end developers to become even more full-stack developers with the speed that's never been seen before. How do you see this evolving over time? Dominic, if you want to go first.
Yeah, that's actually a tough question. How do we see the headless CMS market and the full stack developers evolve in time? I have to say that it really depends on how the technology will switch. I mean, we see Evan working on Vite or Vite really strongly. We see JSworld in the background coming up with more ideas on how to get even faster performances out of the pages itself. We see more and more technologies that we might not even be aware of by now that will come up as well. So there will be a lot of things, especially in the developer experience kind of scenario, where we need to keep up with our own solutions, that when somebody is building something with a headless solution, not only just the CMS, but also e-commerce solution, that they're able to actually combine that with the stack that they choose. And we need to make sure that we can, from a headless CMS perspective, and I guess I'm talking for all 3 of us here, that we need to make sure that it actually works with any technology out there to fulfill any kind of use case. Because as soon as we don't do that, we drop into this monolithic kind of age again. And I guess nobody of us wants to do that.
No. Knut, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I think it's a great point you make. I just this weekend tried to salvage an old CMS, which should shall not be named, but I have to kind of figure out what PHP version it ran on some reason on a box. And I was like, I don't miss this. I don't miss pretending to be a backend developer and a sysadmin. I think actually there has been a lot of movement in this field that has empowered a lot of people. It's kind of like amazing that you can use JavaScript and do all of the things that you can do now with stuff like Strapi and Storyblock and of course Sanity. And I think we will just see that move on. We will see more people being able to build stuff on the web platform. And another interesting development is the rise of the no-code movement, right? That we as developers tend to be a bit scared of that, maybe because they don't need developers, maybe. But I think it's an interesting kind of like democratization of technology that happens. And why does it happen? That's because everything is moving into the digital. So that leaves also a lot of opportunity, I think.
That's very interesting. Pierre, do you have something to say about this?
Yeah, sure. I think we've never been so many front-end developers having the ability to build a website or an application from scratch to production. They can use many tools with a nittiness that we've never seen in the past. Deploying, just take a look at the in this same space, but how do you deploy a front-end application? If you take a look at Netlify or Vercel, just to name a few, it's super easy. They are doing an amazing job, and it's true for CMSs, it's true for e-commerce, it's true for search, it's true for many things. So yes, no code is definitely the future. I would say low code also, because the danger with no code is to get stuck into a proprietary software that you cannot customize, that you cannot change. So that's why giving the flexibility to developers is extremely important. Of course, open source helps, but plugins are definitely something that is extremely important in any LSCMS. And what we are going to see in the future, I think, is more and more integrations with all of the players, like synchronizing the content of the LSCMS to a search engine like Algolia or Elasticsearch. E-commerce is also extremely important. We see more and more front-end developers building very powerful e-commerce websites. And to do this, they use something like Headless CMS, Shopify, or maybe Snippet or Commerce Layer, and they're going to build blocks together. And that's really the way that we see developers building things. And they don't want to take care of the rest. They just want to take things, okay, this, and bing, and they put them together, and then they're done.
I think you make an excellent point there with the advent of no code being a democratization kind of element to making development more open as well, and for non-developers. And this is something I wanted to ask you about. So Strapi, for example, really is one that's merging the boundaries a lot into front-end, back-end development, because how and in general, the three of your platforms are in that space. Like you really are not feeling you're building a backend with it. Is there any maybe something in your mind on how this is going to move, for example, towards making more real-time kind of updates? Because that's probably the last boundary that we are kind of looking at right now. If we see the tools we have at hand, there's still a lot of I'm aware that all of you offer a sort of a real-time feature, right? But still, the communication and the model in which we are developing, which is client-server kind of communication, it's starting to dissolve a bit. With your platforms, and let's maybe explore the case of Strapi first. How is there more development being made on the experience side, for example, how Strapi can offer better tool sets to create experiences and not only that client backend communication?
Yeah, so Strapi is based on Node.js, so you can easily add something like Socket.io to add real time and build any very complex app. And I think there are different ways to see real time. I think real time is really about integrations. Like if you order a product in Shopify, maybe it will automatically update your CMS, or just because you have a custom field to link your CMS to Shopify, when you sell a product and then go to your CMS and look for the product, in the CMS, you will store only the Shopify product ID. So that way you make sure that everything is up to date and you don't have latency between your different services. It's also about synchronizing the content with the search engine and these kind of things. And of course, real-time is also about collaboration inside the CMS, since the more editors there are into the CMS, editing content, maybe editing the same articles at the same time, that's something that is extremely important. So first of all, to avoid conflict, like you update the content and someone else updates it and it can create conflict. That's one thing. But really, the future of headless CMS is about collaboration for content editors. It started with developers. I think developers are extremely important in this market. They have a huge impact in the decision process. But then the future of this market is in the marketing teams, and it will be really about content collaboration to see something like Google Drive, where you can add comments, revisions, and these kind of things. And maybe you will have even different stages, like you have GitHub for developers when it comes to source code. You will have the exact same thing in the different CMSs.
Sanity offers, actually, now that you mentioned the Google Docs experience, recently I remember one announcement from Sanity where you introduced this real-time collaboration as well. Is there anything you could maybe tell us about how Sanity perceives this space, not only on the editor experience, but maybe also on the content consumption side? Is that something you're working on?
Yeah, so Sanity is built as a real-time data store from the ground up. Turns out that's not easy. It is not easy to make a real-time data store that should scale globally. Milliseconds start to feel long, and continents start to feel like the internet is a physical thing, right? We are sending light back and forth. So it's like it's hard, but we are really happy that we made that choice because it unlocks so much. For example, there's kind of like never a case of having a race condition just because people are working in the same document. And if there are kind of like an accidental overwrite, we have the complete revision control. So you can always roll that back and you can see actually who made that letter change inside of the rich text thing and so on. So it's really fascinating what you can unlock with that kind of capability. And of course, when you have this real-time like feature, it's important for people to see where they are in this kind of like space that is the studio, to like, oh, Knut is working on that title field. Maybe I should kind of like leave that be for the moment, not kind of like trample over whatever he's doing, right? So this is the presence feature that you would like take for granted from Google Docs. And on the consumption side of this, we haven't really seen people doing a lot of real time on the front end. You have kind of like sports event stuff and like where it's actually important, right? That people use this. But as for I think most content is a very controlled process. Right? We want to make sure it's correct and so on. You usually don't want to just have it live on milliseconds right on the thing, right? Because you want to have Q&A and so on. So real time for us is really about removing that friction, and not only between people, but also between people and systems. If you have a back office system that is kind of responsible for keeping some of your product data correct, that should be able to update that document while your marketers or whomever are doing their updates, right? Without blocking each other out or making race conditions. So it's most about that, I think.
The story bridge, in essence, is also this feature, right, for the case of Storyblock, Dominic. But it's mostly used on the development side. If I have the right picture for Storyblock, is that something you're also looking maybe to offer a real-time experience for consumption?
So for the editor itself, so it's not just for development, but actually also for the content creator. They also can see a complete real-time update of the site when they're creating something inside Storyblock. We of course also have this like prominent Google Drive kind of experience where you have like the bubble on the top right corner. I guess you cannot go without it anymore. But similar to Knut, we don't see that many people that actually use real time in their applications because also for us the workflow were more important. Because users need to be able to control who's actually able to approve that, who's able to review that, who should be able to allow that to be published. So there are a lot of things that are in the process of creating content from my perspective. Think of it if you are not just a team of like 50 people or something like that, but you're a media house serving like hundred thousands of articles a year, new articles. Who's going to actually approve all of them, who's going to review them, how you can automate that as much as possible, how you can integrate that with approval solutions that you have already in-house. So there are different topics that are slightly more important than real time when it comes to content consumption, at least for us at this point. Not saying that it's not important, but it's highly important for the editors when they are changing content, when they're working together and collaborate, because that's part of the workflow, but not so much on the consumption part. I mean, we have some customers that use it also for real-time events, especially when they push notifications out into WeChat applications, something like that. But that's a completely different mindset because they actually have this real-time kind of data necessity. And not this kind of approval process that we normally see in like 99% of our cases.
And maybe if I can add two things. So first, I think real-time is also super helpful for previews, which is a very bad thing when it for headless CMSs. I mean, in traditional CMSs, it was super easy to have quick previews, but headless CMSs introduced lots of issues, a lot of complexity with this. I mean, it's more and more easy years over years, but real-time can help with this. To when you update the content in the CMS, you can see the preview in your front end without any refresh. And the other thing is that we see more and more apps built through headless CMSs. So it's not only about content, but maybe a chat is not the best example, but sometimes we see real-time applications when the front-end users are supposed to see real-time updates from the CMS, and this is how why it can be very important.
Yeah, 100%. Like the preview is one of the largest things that we were always thinking about, as both of you definitely know. So real-time is like a key factor with that 100%. So it's all about the collaboration. You need to really nail that down. And so, yeah, 100%.
So, well, we're nearing the end of the panel now, and one question we really wanted to maybe close the panel with is, what tip could you give to the members of our audience that are looking to find, how to integrate the best tools out there and leverage their strengths? And maybe I would like to, as a sort of mirror to the first question we had on what is your platform most strong in. Let's start by you, Dominic. What would be the one thing that new members of the audience that would like to use a headless CMS? What is Storyblok really powerful on, and what can it offer them?
Yeah, as soon as you have many different collaborators that want something visual, while you as a developer still want pure data, with the components that we have and the nestability combined with this visual editor, visual composer, you have, one of our customers said it straddles the line between a page builder and the headless CMS like no other. And I really liked it, even though we are definitely not a page builder, don't get me wrong. But you can definitely build it in a way where you can have this experience for the content, the ease of use, and on the other hand, the developers with the full freedom of technology.
All right, that's very, very concise. What about you? What would you say about Sanity if someone was looking to say, well, what is the one thing that Sanity can really offer me?
Yeah, one thing, that's hard. If there's one thing, I would probably say you should try it out because of the community, because we are a lot of people that build with Sanity inside of, at the moment, a Slack workspace that are willing to help you out when you're stuck and share their projects for inspiration and kind of think aloud about how these new opportunities and these other constraints, kind of like what you can do with that. So like try it out for the community, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you. Very, very good point there. And Pierre, what is the one thing that this new potential member of the Headless CMS community would find in Strapi to say, I would like to use it?
It's freedom. It's freedom because you can use Strapi whenever you want. You're not dependent on any other solution. You can customize it as much as you need. If there is anything missing, you can build it yourself. So yeah, that's really about freedom.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here again. It was an amazing conversation that I'm sure a lot of the members of the audience will find pretty interesting points here. Where can we find the communities for all of your platforms? I would like to start with Dominic, as we went right now.
Sure.
Where can our audience members find more about the story?
Yeah, so we definitely have a Discord channel for you ready to go. We have basically everybody in there that is also more than willing to help you. You can find it directly on our website. You should directly see a Discord logo, at least in the footer or in the main menu as well. So feel free to jump in and have a quick chat with us. More than happy to do that.
Knut, you mentioned this as the strong part. Where can we find it?
Yeah, so go to sanity.io/community, and there you'll find projects that people have made, plugins, guides, starters, schemas, and also the Slack community that you can join. So yeah, go there.
Wonderful. And Pierre, where can we find the free community, as you mentioned it?
Yeah, go on strapi.io, click on the community link in the top menu because community is really important for us. And you can join the Slack community. There is a forum as well. There are many projects, tutorials made by the community, so you can discover a lot of things and join what is the most relevant to you.
Wonderful. Well, once again, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for participating in the JSworld conference, and we hope to have you back next year, maybe in person, right? And maybe have an opportunity to really say cheers for the successes of all your platforms.
Thanks a lot for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Have a great time.
Bye.
Bye.